Gunna, real name Sergio Kitchens, is finally out of prison. After taking an Alford plea and being released today, Gunna has a lot of things in front of him, including 500 hours of community service, much of that going to be focused specifically on preventing further gang violence and talking to the youth about the dangers of it. But he was formally sentenced to 5 years, with 4 of those now being suspended, and 1 year was commuted for time served. But he's out. And, many people have looked at this so far and said, is he really out? Is he guilty? Is he not? And basically you have to look at what an Alford plea is. And an Alford plea, essentially, he is maintaining his innocence, but accepting that taking a guilty legal verdict ensures the best possible outcome for him. It's similar to a regular guilty plea, but the main difference being that you are not accepting the time served in prison. Instead, you are serving probation. And Gunna's probation looks right now like 500 hours of community service. Looking at why Gunna was locked up for so long, I think the answer is kind of obvious in one sense, and that's that they wanted information out of him. They wanted Gunna out of the way so that they could get to the real top leaders or more leading offenses in the YSL gang. So I think that explains why Gunna was locked up for essentially nothing. And well, it's nothing compared to what Young Thug Jeffrey was locked up for, who was indicted on 8 counts. And like I said, Gunna was not indicted on nearly as many, and they were much, much less serious. And what's happening right now is many people are conspiring on Twitter. I'm surprised we haven't seen DJ Clown Academics hop on this a little bit faster and spread some misinformation on it.
What's that?
Looking at this right now, people are questioning, okay, well, why was he let out now? Why did he snitch? Did he say this? Did he say that? And, sitting here in my position, I don't really have any, I think, nuance to give to the ethics of snitching and what that is, because, I can't relate to that as a white kid that's from the suburbs that just happens to work in music journalism. But what I can look at is sort of the ramifications of what he said and what he said specifically. And I'm going to read out here what Gunna's statement was when he did not admit guilt and claimed that he was pleading guilty in his best interest. And this is the quote here and this is from Fox 5 Atlanta. He said, quote, "When I became affiliated with YSL in 2016, I did not consider it a quote unquote gang, more like a group of people from Metro Atlanta who had common interests and artistic aspirations. My focus of YSL was entertainment, rap artists who wrote and performed music that exaggerated and quote-unquote glorified urban life in the Black community. While I have agreed to always be truthful, I want to make it perfectly clear that I have not made any statements, have not been interviewed, have not cooperated, have not agreed to testify or be a witness for or against any party in the case, and have absolutely no intention of being involved in the trial process in any way." With the quote continuing, "I've chosen to end my own RICO case with an Alford plea and end my personal ordeal by publicly acknowledging my association with YSL. An Alford plea in my case is the entry of a guilty plea to the one charge against me, which is in my best interest while at the same time maintaining my innocence towards the same charge." And he essentially, that's pretty much the end of the quote. He goes on to say that this is an opportunity to give back and that he will always cherish his support within the YSL music community. And this is where things get kind of interesting. Him sort of disbarring the idea that he's associated with the YSL gang, because I think, something that I think a lot of rap fans know, and now I think the media is kind of catching up on a bit, is that it was like the synonymous association of YSL the Gang and the music label being one in one was the appeal, I think, for a lot of people, and seeing this is like, oh, they're really, really, really about this. But this is where things like that become an issue, because now that Gunna has essentially said that, yes, people in YSL have committed crimes, but furthering himself from the YSL quote unquote gang, and instead saying, oh, but YSL is a label. We saw somebody from Young Thug's camp, a younger member of the label, speaking in court about this, and I'll include a clip of that somewhere here. But the importance here is, like I said, defining what the Alford plea is, knowing what that is, and because the American justice system is such an unjust, racist, and sick place, things like this are obviously very, very confusing, because it's like, well, why can they do this and can't do that? And there's a lot of legal jargon that surrounds it, and obviously that is confusing. And, looking to where Gunna was arrested for the RICO charge, I think that whole thing being an arrestable offense is an absolute joke. It disproves the idea that you are innocent until proven guilty in this country, plain and simple. And so seeing him free in this sense is obviously a good thing. No one is saying this isn't a good thing, but I think what people are saying is, what does this mean for Young Thug now? Somebody whose charges against him are much more serious, somebody who we now know to be a leader in the YSL space. So what comes of this now? And I think that there's not much to say, but it's not looking good, essentially. As I'm editing this now, there's actually an update in the case where there was a raid in Young Thug's house where cell phones and other things were collected, and none of those can now be used in the case. So definitely worth mentioning for what I'm going to say after this. Gunna's free, but Thug isn't. And I think, I don't think people expected them to get out together or anything like that, but there was definitely something to say for the U.S. justice system making Gunna's life absolute hell for 8 months to get information out of him and then say, okay, bye, you can leave now. I just think it's a joke. I think it's not only a joke, it's inhumane, it's terrible. And to see it sort of culminate in the public sphere like this, like people like Gunna and Young Thug are celebrities in the grander sense of things. And I think people aren't privy to the idea of looking at these people like they're actual people, instead celebrities, thinking about how will this affect Gunna's music career, how will this affect how he drops music, what he raps about in his music. It's like it's not about that. It's about the people and what the trauma that they've experienced, that they've gone through. Gunna was just in prison for 8 months, so I think it's important to sort of remind people that the legalities around all of this and the legal jargon is incredibly confusing, but important to look into a little bit if you want to sort of pull apart cases like this and see what happened. And it seems like a similar thing to what music journalist Passion Voice brought up on Twitter with this. Granted, the details are a bit stingy because, he didn't technically plead guilty. He technically took an Alford plea, which just happens to be oh so similar, essentially the same thing as pleading guilty, but technically I'm pretty sure they're two different things. But what he states here is really important, and that the downside, like he says here, is they're going to use this quote unquote guilty plea against Thug. In the jury's mind, Gunna's free, Thug's not. What does that say for Thug, and what does what Gunna said say for Thug as well, in terms of what he said about people in YSL being guilty of committing crimes? And then him comparing it to a strategy that they used with the late, great Drakeo the Ruler, and how essentially this is no isolated incident. And I think that's a big reason why we've been seeing a lot of negativity and pushback, rightfully so, against the RICO Act being enacted and being able to be used to imprison people that should be innocent before they're proven guilty. And this is a prime example of things like that never changing and always affecting the Black community more than it does the white community, especially in hip hop. And I wish all the best for for Gunna, for Young Thug, their family, their friends, everything they're going through, because it's just unfortunate that something so, I think, traumatic like this has to take space in the public sphere. Right now we're seeing a similar thing of trauma in public happening with the Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion case. Granted, that is obviously much different than this, but from the celebrity angle and the sort of voyeuristic angle that I think a lot of people take that are fans of these artists and stuff, it's like, these are real people in these cases. His name might just be Gunna to you, but it's not to his family and friends. His name might be Young Thug or Jeffrey to you, and while that's his real name, that's not who he is. His persona isn't him. These are real people that this is happening to, and I think that's important to remember, especially at a time when so much of this is circulating through the media and so many people are quick to assume one thing or the other.